What up? What up? Welcome back to the Rotoworld Basketball Show presented by NBC. I'm Dan Titus, joined with Noah Rubin and Raphielle Johnson. We're into week 11 in fantasy basketball, and we have the returns of some pretty prominent players that we're going to talk about, as well as some spicy player debates for the rest of the season as we kind of look ahead to the rest of the fantasy season. What's up, fellas? We have a real battle tonight, man. The Oklahoma City Thunder have won 15 games in a row. The Cleveland Cavaliers have won 10 games in a row. This is just the third time in league history that teams with an 85% win percentage or better have met this late in the season. I can't wait. This is going to be a great fantasy game because 8 of these players of the Thunder and the Cavs are in the top 50 in fantasy. But last night was actually pretty fun too. And being that we have a resident Atlanta Hawk fan here of a guy like Noah that saw Trae Young splash a 3-quarter court game winner. I just want to get your takeaways, Noah, from that Utah game because, no Jalen Johnson. And when Jalen Johnson hasn't played this year, Trae Young is averaging over 14 assists a game. I'm sure getting 20 assists last night certainly helps that average. But just want to get your thoughts on the Atlanta Hawks right now as they're playing without Jalen Johnson the last couple of games.
Yeah, it's been an interesting starting lineup. I don't think it's what most people would do or would have predicted would happen, is to slide Vit Krejci in place of Jalen Johnson. He's a solid player, but obviously I think a lot of people would expect DeAndre Hunter to kind of move into the starting lineup. But this move has allowed Hunter to kind of stay in the 6-man role that he's had a lot of success in so far this season. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be a finalist, if not the winner of the 6-man of the year award by the end of this season, assuming he just maintains this pace. But yeah, playing without Jalen Johnson, Trae Young is forced to have the ball in his hands even more the last few years since that Miami series where they, it was clear that they needed more help with having another ball handler. They've had DeJounte Murray, they've had Jalen Johnson, but when they don't have those guys out there, Trae Young just has the ball in his hands a ton. Sometimes it isn't great, and sometimes it's a lot of fun, like we saw last night with the 20 assists, and then obviously one of the most insane game winners in recent history.
I'm just happy it didn't happen at the Garden.
Oh my gosh! That would have been bad.
That would have been classic. Let's be honest about that. But yeah, I think maybe what Trae Young needed was a person who was capable of making plays, but didn't need to have the ball in their hands all the time. I think DeJounte Murray, another point guard. I don't know if there's a clash there, but you have two guys who operate with the basketball in their hands quite a bit. Now you've got Jalen Johnson when he's healthy, Dyson Daniels, who can be good supplementary playmakers. Maybe that mix works a bit better for Trae from a fantasy standpoint. And then, the Hawks, after a slow start, they've kind of cleaned some things up too overall. So I think this rotation that we're seeing in Atlanta seems to work a lot better for Trae Young and the franchise as a whole at this point.
Yeah, and what about the Jazz side of things? Because Lauri Markkanen played, he's been in and out of the lineup. Jordan Clarkson's going to be out at least until the end of January. I picked up Bryce Sensabaugh after a couple of ridiculous last couple of games, and then he was out with an illness, unfortunately. But how are you kind of viewing the Jazz situation with Keontae George also kind of day-to-day, which is letting Colin Sexton flourish, but I also feel like it could be an audition for, hey, come get this guy?
Yeah, I think Sensabaugh, obviously, given what he did in Florida over the weekend, he's going to be a popular pickup. I think even then, even if you picked him up, I wouldn't be too concerned because he's someone that a lot of us peg as a name more for post-trade deadline. So you're getting some production now when he's in the lineup. That's certainly a bonus, but I wouldn't be too concerned about him. I think guys like him, I think Walker Kessler is probably going to be tank-proof just because of how young he is and the struggles he had last year. I think you want him to get as many reps as possible. But guys like Sexton, even John Collins, maybe, those are guys you're probably looking at as maybe this is a 1-month audition when they're on the floor to see what they can fetch on the trade.
Yeah, John Collins may actually be on the trade block for the trade deadline. I know that's kind of surprising news.
Yeah.
He's never really been there before. But I think we're already seeing it. The Jazz are going to be in the race for Cooper Flag by the end of the season. It's going to be tanking very hard, just like they had the last couple of years. So there's a lot of the amount of first round picks they've had over the last few years. It's they have so much talent there, and it's a lot of guys that will need to see minutes over the final 2 months, even when they're tanking, which makes this a lot of fun. I think in the past, when they had like a couple of young guys and then just some random rotation players, like those tanks aren't as much fun as what it is here. So the final 2 months, I think there's gonna be a lot of exciting fantasy options. I know, just to throw another name out there, Isaiah Collier. He hasn't really been a great scorer yet, but he's been able to get a lot of assists when he gets the chance. He has season high 9 assists on Tuesday night in that loss. So a lot of fun young guys to keep an eye on there, but I think we'll have a better idea of it in about a month.
Who do you guys think is going to have the worst record when it's all said and done? The Jazz or the Wizards?
I'm going to say the Wizards by a hair. I think it'll be close. And I think Toronto may end up in the mix too in that conversation because, well, they've been bad.
Yeah, I'm like looking at it because obviously the Wizards have a little bit of a lead right now, but they also play in the East. So maybe they're both going to finish with like only a handful more wins. It's going to be quite the race.
Tank race
for Cooper Flag.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be close. One team, though, that has actually kind of been holding the line pretty well without one of their stars is the Los Angeles Clippers. Kawhi Leonard has returned to basketball, y'all. It's taken a while, but, he's back, even though he's got a minutes restriction, only averaging 10 points, 3 rebounds, and a steal, an assist and a half in his time. So he's obviously going to take some time to ramp up. Definitely have to be patient there. Won't be playing back-to-backs for sure. But we just want to get your thought, Noah, on how you think that his return, even though he's still on the minutes restriction, what does that do for Norman Powell, Derrick Jones Jr., other kind of fringe Clippers that may have been rostered while Kawhi was out?
Yeah, Derrick Jones Jr. back to the bench with Kawhi back. Kawhi hasn't played a ton of minutes yet, so there still is enough minutes for Derrick Jones Jr., but he's not like a great fantasy option even when he's getting 30-plus minutes per game. So I guess if you have him rostered, I think it's totally fine to drop him. As for Norman Powell, it hasn't impacted him yet. I expect that eventually the scoring will come down. I don't know by how much and how quickly that happens because there's not really a reason for them to rush Kawhi back into playing 35 minutes per game yet. So I don't know. I don't think that there's necessarily a really good move to make here unless somebody really wants to sell really low on Norman Powell. And then you can, because I think he's still going to be a really good fantasy option even when Kawhi is playing 35 minutes per game. So that's really the impact there. It's not too drastic actually for a superstar coming back.
Yeah, I think Norman Powell is going to be fine personally. Maybe he doesn't score at the clip that he did to begin the season, but I think he can still get you a good 20 points per game. I think my question would be James Harden. Like, how does this impact his efficiency? I think that's been the big question. We talked about in the Q&A yesterday, 19 straight games with at least 4 turnovers. I know we're used to him having those high turnover games, but that feels a bit extreme for a point guard of his caliber. So I think having a playmaker, another scorer out there, can take some of the workload off of James' shoulders in the long run. So I think that's what I'd be watching for there. So I think Powell and Ivica Zubac are going to be fine personally.
Yeah, Ivica Zubac that's been going off. He definitely had a buy low window for a time there, and I think he's blowing through that now because he's just been hooping. Yeah, I'd say probably both are pretty safe between Norman Powell and Ivica Zubac, and I think Derrick Jones Jr. and Chris Dunn continue to just be guys that if the Clippers have a good schedule for streaming, maybe you pick them up for a couple games on a lighter slate, but definitely don't need to hold by any means. But let's talk about Zion Williamson doing 360s in his return. He looks pretty healthy, and I was listening to him post-game talking about his rehab, and I don't know, the way some reporters ask questions is just so weird, but ultimately it came back to, it's like, oh, how's your recovery been since your rookie year and you're always hurt? And I think it was more about him just admitting that, like, I'm a professional, I'm older, time, you learn some things. And it seemed like he attacked his rehab in a more, as he deemed it, extreme manner. And so I think he's just like, I think as frequently as he was getting hurt, I think he was noticing that, like, I can't just come back as quickly as I can. I'm just going to re-injure it. So let me be fully healthy. And then that's why you see him doing 360 windmills in his first game back. 22 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. and 4 stocks, which I think was a really good thing to see for Zion. Raph, are you selling, or is this a good thing for you right now? You're believing Zion's back, and even though the Pelicans' record sucks, this guy's ready to play basketball.
I'm selling. I think what he did last night in terms of not just the explosiveness and the stats, but also the minutes. Playing 28 minutes in the first game back. Now you're going to have a couple back-to-backs to navigate these next 2 weeks. One tonight and then another next week. But I think overall, I think this is a good sell window for him. If you can get some good value, you can certainly get good value back.
Yeah, I agree. I think we may have touched on that during the Q&A yesterday, Raph, just the fact that it was, anybody that's been like super patient with him, just like leaving him on the IR. And then now they finally have him back. Like, wasn't a great time to sell then. It's like, you might as well see what happens. But now that like they've played really well, and like we've seen him have this like really good game, and obviously the dunk was a really big highlight. I think that makes this a good time to sell, because people are going to see that and say, like, see the pictures of him looking in incredibly good shape. I know there obviously is a lot of like pretty mean, frankly, just to keep it pretty basic, memes that go around about Zion. So seeing him let's like look very healthy, and then obviously have like a really big dunk, like we know what he can be when he's healthy. So it does make it like sense to sell high here. But I mean, I'm not opposed to just holding on to him, because he does, like talk about, like Dan just mentioned, like he seems to be like a more mature NBA player, which a lot of times it takes guys time to figure that out. Not everybody figures it out in the same amount of time. So I don't know. I'm more optimistic about this than I think I have been about Zion in the past.
Yeah, I wrote about it before earlier this week. I was like, hey, as soon as he comes out the gates like crazy, sell him. Like, it's a perfect time to do it. I see the appeal in holding him in points leagues, because you don't have to deal with the lack of threes, the turnovers, the poor free throw percentage. But I can't just help but look at the Pelicans record and be like, I just don't know if they're going to do this for 30. Like, is he going to play the rest of the season like confidently? Like, what's their record right now? They're 7-30. They're 7-30. I don't know. I'm still wondering how much DeJounte Murray is going to continue this run too. So I don't know.
I think that would. Sorry to cut you off, but that would be my question to you two guys. Does this change how you look at DeJounte Murray with Zion back in the lineup? Because he had been playing well, but I think maybe is this a chance? You think about what their record is. They're probably going to have to be on a near record pace to like get into like a top 6 spot and maybe play in, but still they've dug themselves such a deep hole. Maybe he's a shutdown risk too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of these guys in New Orleans are, or if they're not traded, that they're definitely going to be shutdown candidates. They have their own pick. It's a really good class. But I don't know. They just got Zion back. I know that they lost that game. CJ McCollum shot 1 of 14. That's not going to happen very often. If he shoots his average, they probably win. They do have a couple of tough games coming up in Boston as one of them, but some other winnable games, 2 home games against the Jazz. And this game coming up tonight is against Portland, obviously without Zion. So I don't know. Maybe they win a handful of games. I think it's 11 and a half games out of the play-in race right now. So maybe they see how the next, honestly, month goes until the trade deadline. And if things are really not going well still, even with Zion back, then they probably pull the plug pretty quickly and make a bunch of moves. But it's not entirely a lost season yet. I'm not optimistic that they'll start winning a bunch of games and get back to like the postseason. But I think it's something we evaluate over the next month, just like the team will be.
Yeah, I think it looks to me like it's a lost season. They got to get 11 games to 500, and they still, Trey Murphy's going through he's day-to-day with an ankle injury. Obviously, Brandon Ingram's still not back. I think this is probably more of an audition for Zion for other teams to be like, hey, look, come get me. I still got it. He did change his agent along with Brandon Ingram. So, I think more so, maybe you hold Zion to the trade deadline if you can, but I don't know. This situation is going to be weird because there's so much fantasy opportunity with this team. But if they continue to lose the pace that they are, I just don't see them actually keeping these stars in the lineup down the stretch when fantasy managers need them, close to the playoffs. Another person I don't know if you can rely on right now, and it's just a weird situation. Jimmy Butler. I guess the Heat were looking to trade him to the Grizzlies, and he was like, "Nah." So clearly, this is about the money and not anything else. He just wants another contract, and I don't know who's going to give it to him. Dude's old as hell, and clearly he's pretty disruptive to a locker room. He's a great player in the postseason, but I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go. He's got a 7-game suspension. He's already had 3 games to that suspension, so 4 left. But in the interim, the Heat looked great last night against the Warriors. I think on the back-to-back, especially the way that Nikola Jovic looked, he just looked money. So I'm wondering, Noah, is this out of Jaime Jaquez, who also had a good game, Duncan Robinson, and Nikola Jovic, which player would you think would have the most fantasy value rest this season, assuming Jimmy Butler doesn't return to the lineup?
I think I'd lean Jaquez. I feel like it's the safest option. Jovic has been really good the last 3 games, especially last night, but he also was a starter earlier in the season. The minutes haven't always been there, even when he started. The production hasn't been there when he's gotten the minutes. Like, he's playing well, and hopefully he's turned a corner, but I feel like Jaquez is definitely a safer option. He had a triple-double on Monday night, and then he was okay on Tuesday night. Like, wasn't great, but he was solid. I don't know. I think both of them are probably my top 2. I'm not super interested in Duncan Robinson unless I just like really need threes in a slightly deeper league. But Jaquez is probably the one I feel the best about.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think with Duncan, he's more of a specialist than anything. Like, if you need 3-pointers and he may be your target. Like, he had 8 assists last night. That's great, but I don't see him doing that consistently. So I think I would go Jaquez and then Jovic second. And I just wonder what they're going to do after this suspension is up. Like, do you just kind of work out something quietly? It's like, look, man, we'll give you all the resources you need, but just kind of stay away from the team at this point, because we saw how well they played without him in Houston. The game ended with the fight. Then they bring him back, and it felt like the team morale just kind of sank a bit. So, and they're back to playing good basketball. I think we've seen the last of Jimmy Butler in a Heat uniform in terms of playing basketball. Maybe he wears one around the house or out shopping or something, but I don't think he'll be playing basketball for again. Yeah.
Hey, he's got a coffee business to run now, man.
Yeah, I just had to clear that up. Like,
he might wear it for Halloween. He could just casually wear it, but as far as on an NBA, he might even be petty enough to wear it pre-game heading into a game. But as far as on the court, done.
I think you point out a good thing in that, Raph. The last game that he played before he got suspended, when he chucked up that 1-foot 3-pointer, that was just like a horrible possession. It just sucked off. You could just tell, like, everyone was just like, bro, this is not going to work. So I am curious about what they're going to do. I feel like the NBA PA is going to have to do something where they're going to like negotiate, because you can't. The protocols in the NBA now, you can't
just put a guy on ice like
exactly. So they're going to work out something. I think they're probably talking to Adam Silver now about how to do something until they can get something done, if anything. We haven't talked about how bad Terry Rozier has been from a fantasy perspective this year, but his rostership's down to 66%. You would think that this would be a great opportunity for him to kind of right the ship, but he hasn't. He's down to 66%, I think, in Yahoo leagues. He's seen a ton of minutes, but it's just not there. I'm actually team Jovic, just probably because I've picked up Jaime Jaquez several times when Jimmy Butler's been out this year, and it's that roller coaster that Noah was describing. It's like, hey, triple-double here with 3 steals, and then it's like 4 points with 2 rebounds and nothing. Where Jovic, I don't know, I'm kind of impressed by his assists too. Like, his playmaking is kind of there, along with the rebounds. So I don't know. I think it's a flyer. It's probably going to be different people going off on different nights, and I don't know. We'll see. But I'm team Jovic for the time being, just because I've gotten burned by Jaquez a couple times this year. Did get a good tweet for change from Shams Charania. Paolo Banchero is going to make his return to the lineup this week, likely on Friday versus the Bucks, which I think that makes a lot of sense considering that they are 4-5 in the Eastern Conference standings. Very important game. What does this do for a lot of these fringe Orlando Magic players that have been streamable.
Mhm.
Tristan Da Silva, Cole Anthony, pretty much anybody that because everyone's just hurt for the Orlando Magic right now. And Franz Wagner still has a considerable amount of time before he returns. So what are you expecting from the Orlando Magic going forward here?
I feel a bit better about Tristan Da Silva than I do Cole Anthony, just because of the efficiency issues with Anthony. And now you're adding a player in Paolo, depending on what his workload looks like minutes wise, he can make plays within the offense for himself and for other people. So I think Da Silva, he doesn't need the basketball in his hands very much. He's been much improved over the last few weeks. I feel a little bit better about him. I think my other question would be the center rotation with Paolo back. Like, do you stick with Goga Bitadze, or does Wendell Carter Jr. get back into the starting lineup to play alongside Paolo just because of the perimeter shooting ability? So I think that's something else to watch. I think Goga's going to be fine, especially with Moritz Wagner done for the year. But I think that's another angle to kind of keep track of once Paolo gets back on the floor here.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty interesting one that I hadn't really considered. I think it's probably the most fantasy relevant question in Orlando right now.
Yeah,
because a lot of these other guys are just fringe rosterable players with Orlando's top 3 scorers out. Like, I'm not confident that I'm going to stream Tristan Da Silva or Cole Anthony when Paolo's on the floor. Like, I just don't think. Like, Cole Anthony was only really playing a ton of minutes because they just needed somebody that could create their own shot. Like, Tristan Da Silva will still be, I think, a larger part of the rotation than Cole Anthony, but I mean, it's going to be Paolo just having the ball in his hands as much as he wants until Franz Wagner returns. So the center rotation will be interesting because having Wendell to space the floor and give Paolo a little bit more room to create, I think that does make a lot of sense, even if Goga has been playing really well. So we'll see what Jamal Mosley decides to do. But yeah, it's not that there was a ton of great streaming options in Orlando before this, but it's Paolo Banchero is going to suck all the usage up, and there's just not going to be a ton to go around, which is totally fine. Like, he's their best shot creator, their best player. Like, that's fine, but that's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a great thing for fantasy managers. I mean, Paolo was dropping 50 bombs before he got hurt. So, I mean, with so much usage and opportunity available with Franz out, Jalen Suggs day-to-day with his back injury, we don't know, really haven't gotten an update on the severity of that. So, yeah, it's going to be Paolo. Even if he's playing 25 minutes in a minutes restriction, he's still going to have a considerable fantasy input there in production. Let's talk about the Mavericks, because earlier in the week, Kyrie Irving, it was announced that he's going to be missing 1 to 2 weeks, a minimum of 2 weeks with a back injury. Bulging disc doesn't sound good. I don't know if that's an injury that you can really play through for a long period of time. So I'd be a little bit concerned. Spencer Dinwiddie's rostership is down to 15%. Quentin Grimes is up to 24%. We talked about it a little bit last week, and you guys are both Team Grimes, with a little bit of hate at Spencer Dinwiddie. Raph, have you come around to Spencer Dinwiddie after last game?
Almost out of necessity, to be honest with you. As you mentioned, Luka's going to be out at least a month. Kyrie, that doesn't sound like a 1 to 2 week injury. And that's just to be reevaluated. So he's out. Right. So I get, Dinwiddie would be that guy right now. I think Najee Marshall, you certainly throw his name into the mix as well, since he's starting. And in terms of guys who are already rostered in a lot of leagues, I think you expect more out of PJ Washington. Clay had that flurry during last night's game, 3 straight threes. So those guys are certainly worth watching as well.
Yeah, those were the names that I was going to mention. Najee Marshall didn't have a good shooting night in their last game, but still playing starters minutes and has been really good as a starter this season. And then, Grimes and Dinwiddie were both really good in their win over the Lakers. So I put both of them as guys in the daily pickups column over at Rotoworld. So I think definitely guys to take a look at. It is just like Raph said, based off of necessity and opportunity. Like somebody's gonna have to shoot the shots, and somebody's gonna have to get the assists. Somebody's gonna have to dribble the ball. Like, those are the guys that are doing it, and they're pretty widely available.
Yeah, I was surprised how low Grimes is, considering what he's been doing from even an assist perspective. Man, he's been stuffing the stat sheet. And just want to give a shout to LeBron James. I don't know how the hell he's doing switch hand midair dunks at 40 years old, man. That's just crazy. So shouts to him, man. It's always great to see him doing this stuff, just defying age at this point. But we got some news also. Phoenix Suns had to make some changes after having a 4-game skid. There were rumors that the locker room wasn't all the way there, and it forced Bradley Beal to the bench. Ryan Dunn inserted in the starting lineup, but also Jusuf Nurkic also went to the bench with Mason Plumlee replacing him. Raph, you talked about it last week. Mason Plumlee potentially being an ad before this even happened because of the Suns' favorable schedule. Are you still sticking to Mason Plumlee? Because I think right now, I think I've seen some chatter well before. Maybe it was Dan Besbris or Alex Verclean saying that Jusuf Nurkic wasn't a rosterable player. I've come to that. I'm with you now because he looks hot garbage now. So yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the first red flag for him was when they signed Tyus Jones, because he's someone that they picked up to be kind of like that supplementary playmaker when they didn't have a point guard last year and he had the basketball in his hands a good amount. That was going to change here. And he's someone where if the offense isn't clicking, you start to realize this man does not defend at all. So it's like, so they had to make the change because it's not like they had a defensive stopper in that lineup when it was Beal, Booker, and Kevin Durant on the floor. So Mason Plumlee's not like a lockdown defender, but he's much better in the 2-man game than Nurkic is. Doesn't need the basketball. So I think that made sense there. You get Ryan Dunn in there, who's a superior defender to Bradley Beal. And, those guys, I don't know if the production is going to be there, but the minutes probably will be in terms of making them worth the risk in deeper fantasy leagues.
Yeah, and I think deeper leagues is where you're actually going to find value from these guys because Ryan Dunn, I think he's very capable of getting you both steals and blocks. Like, he could get 2 steals, 2 blocks, and 2 threes in a game, but he's probably going to go 3 games in a row after that where he has 4 points, 2 rebounds, and no defensive stats. Like, it's just been inconsistent. He's a rookie. Like, those things happen, even though he is a really, really good defender, and it makes sense for the team. Plumlee is going to get you rebounds. He is a pretty good passer for a big. He can get you some defensive stats occasionally, but he's really there from a fantasy perspective to get you rebounds. He's not there to score. I think he took 1 shot and it was like an ugly left-handed hook shot that didn't hit the rim. And he was like, yep, all right, I'm good. I'm not taking any more shots. We saw how that goes. KD, Devin Booker, y'all got it. And it works for them. So it's deeper leagues. That makes sense. Like, let me get a guy that can grab 13 rebounds and I don't need to worry about the scoring, or if it fits your punt build, sure. I was hoping that moving Bradley Beal to the bench would kind of unlock him a little bit. And it did in that first game. And then this last game, it was kind of like, and I was like, okay, so this really is just like a petty move to try and get him to waive his no trade clause. Like, that's all this is. Like, it's disheartening. Like, I think that's what reports are saying.
Yeah,
so hopefully hopefully there's some authenticity behind that. But I was hoping that would be like we'll try this, but it seems like they're just trying to force him out of town, which kind of stinks. Like, there's a lot of questions about the fit as soon as the trades happened to kind of bring Beal in, but I don't know. I thought it would be a little bit more exciting than what it's been.
Yeah, trying to get him to waive that no trade clause. I don't know. Yeah. It's slippery slope there, and I think what's Phoenix's record right now?
18 and 19. 16 and 19.
Ugh. Yeah. They're everyone's slandering the Kings, but at least the Kings are winning games now.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see. This is definitely something to monitor. If Bradley Beal does waive his trade clause, do you see there being some fantasy value in holding Ryan Dunn beyond just like a streamable week of them having a competitive advantage on games played, or someone's probably going to come back and return?
Yeah,
right?
I think that's the issue. Like, for example, if they're to make a move for Jimmy Butler, that drops Ryan Dunn off the radar almost immediately. So, yeah, I think this is something where, in terms of at least him, it's definitely a matchup play for this week. And next week, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. We will see what happens. I think Matt Ishba is one guy that might actually pay Jimmy Butler that extension because that guy does not care about giving bad contracts out. Yeah. We've learned that. But let's talk about football for a second. It's wild card weekend on Sunday Night Football. Super wild card weekend on Sunday night. Catch Jaden Daniels and the Commanders as they travel south to a date with Baker Mayfield and the Bucks. Coverage of the winner-go-home battle begins at 7:30 Eastern on NBC and Peacock. Yeah, I got it. That's going to be a great game, man. Jaden Daniels, third or second in EPA as a rookie. This dude's going to be for real. So make sure you guys pay attention in fantasy football next year. Should definitely be one of the first quarterbacks off the board. Let's talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves for a second, because Anthony Edwards has just had to take on so much lately because, frankly, Mike Conley hasn't been good as a starting point guard. And I don't know if it's maybe there just wasn't enough room for him to operate. And now moving to the bench, maybe that unlocks something out of Naz Reid. But certainly Dante DiVincenzo in the lineup has certainly put more usage to Anthony Edwards. So want to get your guys' take. I'll start with you, Noah, on do you think this is a good thing for Anthony Edwards? Like, should we see some boost in the assists, maybe some improvement in efficiency, or is it just going to be, pretty much more of what we've seen from Ant this year?
I think you're definitely going to see more Ant. I think you're going to see him with the ball in his hands, and sometimes it's going to be some assists, but most of the time he's going to be shooting it. The last 3 games, averaging 27 shots per game. Some incredible scoring numbers.
Yeah,
a ton of threes, and it's fun. It's great for fantasy, especially. But he's shooting the ball in like a lot. Like it's a lot. So the assists are, he had an 8 assist game in there, took 29 shots, got 8 assists. So that's what I'm saying. Like, he's going to have the ball in his hands, and whatever happens, it's going to be because of Anthony Edwards. It's going to be just like in my career on 2K. It's like I'm either scoring or I'm getting the assists because my stats matter more than anybody else's. And he doesn't have that same mentality. That's not what I'm getting at. But I think, yes, it's going to be great for him from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, you have him rostered. This is outstanding. But if you have, say, Julius Randle rostered, you might be in trouble. Julius played better against the Pelicans on Tuesday than he did in that win over the Clippers on Monday. There was some foul trouble there as well. But I think he took 10 shots on Monday and 11 on Tuesday. So if you're him or someone who hasn't rostered, you'd like to see that number in the mid-teens since he's their second best scoring option. But the Ant-Man basically calling the shots. I don't know if that's going to happen. So, yeah, I don't know how much you can get for him if you were to trade him, but I think this is either a sell point or if you're feeling adventurous, maybe you buy low on Julius Randle, but I don't think I'd advise that.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd advise that either. I mean, I think with the contract situation, like they're not going to extend him at this point, where their record sits and the chemistry that just hasn't really emerged between them. I think it's going to be more of the Julius Randle experience of what we've seen. Good games, bad games. Benched in the fourth quarter in crunch time, then playing, 35 minutes. So Dante DiVincenzo, I think, is interesting. See where his rostership is at right now. He's at, let's see, he's at 63. So shallow leagues, he still might be out there. I think him in the starting role, still primarily a 3 and points guy, but, he can do other things. So I think with him getting starters minutes is certainly going to help his value. But yeah, I think this is just the Ant show from now on. I mean, 27 shots per game over the last 3 is crazy work. In terms of rookies, though, I wanted to go to the rookie report for a second because for much of the attention that Alex Sarr has received recently, we talked about him. He was under 50% rostered in Yahoo leagues for a considerable amount of time, which is pretty wild. He now just became NBA. He's the top of the NBA's rookie ladder. He passed Yves Missi, which I think is interesting. But Bub Carrington on the low has been hooping recently. He is top 100 over the last 2 weeks. So, Noah, I want to get your take on how you feel Bub Carrington's rest of season value looks. And to the surprise of nobody, Malcolm Brogdon's hurt again. So I think he's opened up another opportunity for him to continue being the starting point guard and being a primary ball handler, facilitator for this team.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a role that's going to be like a good one for him from a fantasy perspective. Brogdon's already been ruled out for Wednesday night's game, as has Jordan Poole. But Bub Carrington's actually questionable with some back soreness. So we'll see. It might be a Jared Butler night in Washington. But Bub Carrington, if assuming that Brogdon's out for at least a while, like potentially, like who knows? We'll see Carrington with the ball in his hands a little bit more. And then depending on how long Jordan Poole's out, that could impact things as well. But I think he's definitely a rosterable player at this point and should be for the rest of the season. I don't really see him getting moved back to the bench, though I think we kind of said that early in the season when he was playing really well. And then Brogdon came back and he did move back to the bench. So like fingers crossed that at this point they've kind of realized, hey, we're not making it to the postseason. Not that they really had the expectation of that anyway, but as long as he's a starter, I think he's definitely a rosterable player, some good assist numbers, some good rebound numbers, and probably not major efficiency issues, but what you kind of expect from a rookie point guard.
Yeah, I don't really know if there's too much to add to that. You know, the Wizards are, look at their record. They're currently 6-28. Even in the Eastern Conference, that's pretty much a sign that it's pretty much over for them in terms of competing this year. But you've got a good young crop of players there between Bub, Bilal Coulibaly, Keyshawn George, and Alex Sarr. I think we're going to see those guys playing starters minutes for the rest of the season pretty soon here, because it doesn't make much sense to keep rolling out the same product when you kind of know what you're going to get from guys like Poole, Brogdon, and Kyle Kuzma. And I believe Kuzma was hurt last night too. So,
yep, he was. Yeah, I think Bub Carrington, man, shooting 56% from the field over the last 2 weeks, but more importantly, 34 assists, 5 turnovers. That's Tyus Jones type point guarding right there. So yeah, from a fantasy perspective, that's what you want to see out of a rookie point guard. Usually you don't get that type of efficiency and on such a bad team too. Like that just screams someone that should be rostered more than 12% of leagues. So if he's out there, he's definitely available. Scoop him up, because rest of the season it looks great for him. Let's talk about the rest of the week though, for streaming purposes. Is there any players that you guys are picking up for the rest of the week here that we haven't already talked about? I know Utah has a pretty good schedule here. They got a back-to-back on Saturday and Sunday against Phoenix and Brooklyn. I think that's a prime opportunity for Lauri Markkanen to miss a game. So much of the people that we talked about, hopefully Bryce Sensabaugh is back by then. Phoenix, you still got some opportunities with Ryan Dunn and Mason Plumlee, with them playing Atlanta, Utah, and Charlotte. I mean, that's just fantasy gold there. But anybody else you guys are picking up? I know Brooklyn's a pretty good team for the rest of the week as well. I don't know if there's anybody that interests you there between Tyrese Martin or Keon Johnson, maybe.
Yeah. I'll go. Yeah, Keon Johnson would be one. Sticking in Washington, I'd say Corey Kispert too. He had 5 3-pointers the other night. Can be a bit hit or miss with that shot, but I think he's going to be a key player off the bench for them moving forward. And all those young guys too, given the schedule coming up. And they've got another wraparound back-to-back Sunday and Monday as well. So I think the young Wizards, Brooklyn, those are definitely teams to kind of target for the rest of the week here.
Yeah, I was going to add in another Washington guy because Kuzma, I think, exited at halftime from that last game, or just before halftime. Justin Champagnie, I think, started the second half in his place. So Kispert played better. Champagnie didn't play all that well, but I assume that if Kuzma remains out, that Champagnie will be the one that starts. So that's, a guy that has played well as a starter.
Yeah, and I'll take a look at Detroit. They got 3 games in 4 nights from Wednesday to Saturday. So Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, Ausar Thompson, if he's feeling better, I think would be a good pickup there. Trying to see here who else. Indy's got 3 games. Andrew Nembhard, I think, is a player that's been playing better. Toumani Camara, we haven't talked about him much, but he's been playing well with Jeremy Grant out. Top 100 player. Is that someone that you guys are interested in picking up with them playing 3 games over the course of the next 5 days? Oh, no, they got 3 games in 4 nights as well. So Wednesday through Saturday, they got 3 games.
Yeah, I think he's, not super, super exciting, but I think he is a guy that has played well that I'd be fine, like, as a schedule streamer. Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah, I like that pick.
Yeah, you guys seem lukewarm on it. I'll pick up
Yeah.
Toumani.
No, I think he can definitely give you defensive production. So yeah, I do like that pick. And then
Yeah, and also want
we
to
don't
throw
know
out.
what's going on with Jeremy Grant. So
No, to surprise of none. Keon Ellis has been playing better as the Sacramento Kings have. And it's funny because I don't know, Malik, there's like a snippet, some kind of cut of Malik Monk talking about, oh, we're just believing in the system as if, they didn't, I guess Mike Brown lost the locker room. But I think it's more about like, y'all just need some defense in there. And Keon Ellis is providing that. So no surprise that he's seeing 30 minutes a night now. Is that somebody that you guys would be interested in picking up, at least for the short term, or is this more of a long-term play, do you think?
Forever. Keon Ellis, I love Keon Ellis. I was really excited about the way he finished last season. I know we talked about this yesterday, Ref. He was a guy that I had as a late round flyer coming into the season because his game is so fantasy friendly, and now he's getting the minutes. So it's a ton of defensive stats, and it's a handful of threes there as well. Perfect pickup for category leagues, and it doesn't seem like Doug Christie has interest in playing him less.
Yeah. Sometimes you just need a different voice. I don't think it's about what Mike Brown did or didn't do. Just Doug Christie has a different perspective, and it's led to good things for Keon Ellis.
Yep, that it has.
Did y'all see the Malik Monk quote? I think it was post game yesterday where he was talking about like having the voice in the locker room and it being different from like someone who has actually played the game, played in the league before. And I was okay, like I get it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of coaches that didn't play in the league that won championships. So I was like, is this like clear just shade to Mike Brown? Like Mike Brown was probably brutally honest with them about some things, whereas Doug Christie probably knows how to, I don't know, cater to their egos as being a former player or something. I don't know. But Doug Christie was never an ego guy. So I'm like, were you the guy to really be delivering the star message? I don't know. But he played with some, so who knows? Let's talk about some more football stuff real quick. The All-American Bowl, America's top high school football prospects face off in the annual All-American Bowl presented by America's Navy. Watch the nation's best this Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. Time for some rest of season debates. So the number one overall pick to most this year was either Nikola Jokic or Victor Wembanyama. One of my bold predictions this year was that SGA second half of the season, or I guess post January on, would be the number one overall fantasy player. So far, that is holding. But Nikola Jokic can just drop a 30-point triple-double, and then that will just dead that. Or Wembanyama will get 8 blocks like he's been doing. So, Noah, what's your thought rest of the season? Who will finish as the number one overall player? Jokic, Wemby, or SGA?
I think this is like just whichever one you have rostered is going to be great. Like this is one of those debates where it's like you could chalk it up to fit with your team, which categories do you need more help with. I'm going to lean Jokic because, and it's very, not anything like big reasons or anything, but he is, as of right now, he has been the best player in fantasy in 9-cat leagues. And I think it's easier to hold that lead than make up the ground. Denver also, I think, needs so much from him just to stay afloat, whereas the Thunder have a little bit more depth and the Spurs have lower expectations. But, Denver is in win now mode, and they kind of rely on Jokic more than the other two teams to try and win a championship. And then also Jokic I think Denver has played 2 less games than the other. No, excuse me. That was for a different point. They don't have a 2-game week. Both the Spurs and the Thunder have a 2-game week at some point. The Spurs in week 13, Thunder in week 14. Denver doesn't have one of those, so you don't have any of those lapses there.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Jokic. I think as long as he stays healthy, he's going to continue to produce it at an elite level. I think they all will, but I just feel that, like Noah said, his importance to that Denver lineup, especially with their lack of spacers, I think that's going to be key for him, and I think he's going to remain number one. But I can see an argument for all 3 of these guys. Wemby with the block shots, SGA just continues to master the entire game of basketball, it feels like. So I think all 3 of these guys are going to be elite options, and you have any of them, you're well on your way to being highly competitive in your league playoffs.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Wemby because I think Denver is going to make a move to get someone in there because they need some help. I think Zach LaVine would be interesting, and then that would obviously bring down some of those points that he's been averaging. Probably helps his assist too, but I don't know. I'm more on the track of Victor Wembanyama's finally getting comfortable. The rebounds this month, I mean, it's only been 3 games, but he's averaging 18 boards. If he can keep that up to like 14 rebounds, it's going to be really close to Jokic with the blocks that we talked about. So I'm just gonna assume that Victor Wembanyama goes on a ridiculous tear, and then we all look at him like, "Oh my God, this guy should have been the number 1 pick," like we all believed in the preseason. But yeah, Jokic is outstanding, man. Really, no wrong answer for this one. Jalen Johnson versus Dyson Daniels. Who are you taking, Raph?
I'm going to take Jalen Johnson. Daniels has been an absolute beast defensively, especially in the steals category. But I think Jalen continues to take things up a notch with his offensive game. So as long as he's out on the floor, I think I'm going to go Jalen Johnson.
I agree. I think Dyson Daniels obviously has the edge in steals. That's really the only, I guess, also turnovers. But that's kind of his main advantage over Jalen Johnson, and it's why he is 21st in 9-cat leagues on Basketball Monsters because of the steals. Jalen Johnson's game is way more well-rounded, and he's not just average across the board. Like, he's pretty good in almost every category. So I would give the edge to Jalen Johnson.
Yeah, it's a clean sweep for Jalen Johnson. Just looking at the usage rates between them, Jalen Johnson's well over 24%. Dyson Daniels sits at 17. So, I mean, you just look at the numbers. Jalen Johnson's more involved in the offense. Obviously, what Dyson Daniels does defensively is huge for fantasy. But Jalen Johnson just does more. So, yeah, I'll take Jalen Johnson, even though he's dealing with a shoulder injury right now. This one's pretty interesting. Evan Mobley versus Jaren Jackson Jr. And I think at face value, it's like, oh, Evan Mobley. But Jaren Jackson Jr. has been on a tear lately. Yeah. And the longer Ja Morant is out and Desmond Bane is out and not playing well, I mean, I think that gives a slight edge maybe to Jaren Jackson Jr. What do you think, Noah?
This is the one I really went back and forth on, like had it typed out with my notes who it was, deleted it, retyped somebody back out, that changed again. I think I landed on Evan Mobley, but I feel like this is such like a tight one. You can really just take the cop-out answer and say, what do you need more help in? What categories? It's pretty similar, but obviously Evan Mobley is a little bit of a better rebounder, though Jaren Jackson has been rebounding pretty well recently. I don't know. Like it's really tough. I'll lean Mobley. They do play or have played 2 fewer games than Memphis. This was what I was repeating earlier when we were talking about the top 3 teams or top 3 players that I had that point down there. So he'll have a couple extra games of production. So if you're looking at it for who would you rather have rostered the rest of the season, you could potentially get 2 more games out of Mobley. But yeah, that one, it's a toss up.
I'm taking Tripp. I think, with the injuries of Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, they'll probably be back. They'll be back at some point, but I just think once they return, it's going to be more focused on Jaren Jackson in terms of what they do offensively because of his skill set. I know Ja can be electric. We've seen Desmond Bane have really good runs offensively too, but I just feel like Jaren's taking his game to a level where they're going to have to make him more of a focal point offensively. I know they tried to do that with Evan Mobley, and he's certainly responded well, but you still have Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and Jared Allen. I think those guys are a bit more dependable than Ja Morant and Desmond Bane, even though we've seen, like we said, we had seen those guys have great moments, but I think the consistency of those guys in Cleveland's other 3 stars is a bit better than Memphis's. So I think that's why I take Jaren overall here.
Yeah, that was kind of my position as well, Raph. It was more about the supporting cast. Have way more faith in the supporting cast. As we talked about earlier in the show, it's like they got 3 other players in the top 50 to kind of keep that Cleveland team rolling. And then I'd also throw out there, I don't know if they're still chasing history or if they will be, later in the season, but I think there could be some rest opportunities for Evan Mobley down the stretch, whereas Memphis is in a dogfight right now. I mean, they're 3rd place in the Western Conference, but that can change very quickly. So yeah, I think that I'm gonna take Jaren Jackson Jr. I don't have him in any spots. I have more Evan Mobley, but I'm just impressed by what he's done offensively to kind of keep Memphis afloat, and then also being one of the top 3 teams. But then also, I mean, this dude's averaging 3 stocks a game, damn near, steals and blocks. Whereas Evan Mobley's definitely more of a block guy, and then also Jaren Jackson Jr. gives you more consistent threes, even though Evan Mobley's shooting them better. So no wrong answer with that one either. I think that one's pretty tight. So that was definitely a good player comparison. We got to throw up a blind Twitter poll on that because their stats are very similar, but depends on all on need here in team fit. What about Cade Cunningham and Jalen Brunson, Noah? How do you feel about that one?
It's another one that's pretty tight. I think I'll lean Cade Cunningham. I don't know. It might just be kind of a vibes thing for me that I just would rather have Cade Cunningham rostered, but a little bit higher usage, kind of similar to the Jokic Wemby SGA debate. I think that Detroit relies on Cade Cunningham more than New York will need to rely on Jalen Brunson, especially if they're just like competing for a play-in spot. Like if you take, I guess what my point with that is, like if you take Cade Cunningham out of Detroit, they're going to be talking about Cooper Flag Photoshop edits in Detroit Pistons jerseys immediately. If you take Jalen Brunson out, I think that they're still a postseason team. Like they're a better team. So, and then also if you look at just 8-cat numbers, Cade Cunningham has been a top 20 player at 8-cat this season. And yeah, I like Cade. So hopefully it's not bursting Raph's bubble.
No, you're right. I agree with you actually. If you look at that Knicks roster, you look at the 2 rosters beyond those guys, Detroit doesn't have a player on par with Karl Anthony Towns. And I think that was a deciding factor for me. He's a top 5 player. He's going to be a heavy usage guy the rest of the season. So that would be my biggest reason for taking Cade over Jalen, because fantasy-wise, it's pretty much Cade at this point up in Detroit. Now, you have some other guys who played well in stretches, but in terms of the consistent production, it's Cade. So I would take Cade over Brunson in this debate.
Yeah, I would take Cade too. He offers more defensively. I think he's going to have higher assists. And for much of what you guys talked about, I mean, I think it's actually a better case for the fact that Cade Cunningham has no supporting cast, and they're also, at 500 right now. So I think that this is a clear culture shift of this team is trying to win. Whereas the New York Knicks, they're sitting pretty comfortable. And to be honest, like I was talking about on a podcast yesterday, but Tom Thibodeau is going to be Tom Thibodeau. And at some point, man, you got to give your boys some rest, because Brunson's just playing way too many minutes. Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, they're sitting pretty comfortable in that 3 spot right now. We'll see what the Magic do with Paolo back, but I wouldn't be surprised if, as the season wears on, maybe we see Brunson playing a little bit less as we get closer to the postseason, where I think Detroit, they're going to be going for it, and Cade Cunningham is definitely lead dog there. That'll do it for the Rotoworld basketball show. I'm surprised we made it out of here in under an hour, guys. Well done. Yeah. We'll see you next week in week 12 for Noah Rubin, Raphielle Johnson, and Dan Titus. See you next week. Peace.